This is Appalachian Vibes from WNCW. I'm your host, Amanda Bocchi. Appalachian Vibes is a show dedicated to challenging the expectations and celebrating the diversity of music and art created in and around Appalachia. This week, my guests are the soul pop funk ensemble from Asheville, North Carolina, Shabudikah. We discuss the many incarnations of the band, what finally made it click, and their worst ever tour story. The Gone Ghosts are a Carrborro, North Carolina Americana alt-country band born from the seasoned singer-songwriter Dave Hedeman. Dave Hedeman and the Gone Ghosts assemble thoughtful lyrics and a thoroughly produced alt-country direction. That's the next hour on Appalachian Vibes from WNCW. This is Appalachian Vibes from WNCW. I'm your host, Amanda Bocchi. My guest is the pop funk ensemble called Shabudikah from Asheville, North Carolina, on how they got their start. I'm speaking with Reed, the guitar player, and Phil, the drummer.
So I went to school here in Asheville at UNCA, and I met up with a guy named Jamie Berlin, who was our saxophone player. And through him, I joined a band, and that's where I met Nate. And
to get to their current lineup, it took a few years and a long game of musical chairs.
That band fell apart, as they do. And then that's when we were able to start Shabudikah with Kevin, Joe, and Justice. And then, as things happen, some of those members left the band, and that's where we picked up Phil and Hinton, our bass player, and Patrick Allison on trumpet.
What would you classify your music as?
I most readily classify it as like funk and funk soul, like kind of vibes. We did this really goofy video submission for the North Carolina Museum of Art in Raleigh, and if you're watching North Carolina Museum of Art, we're still upset about that.
Or we're not,
we're not.
And you could invite us now.
We're actually really not that upset about it, but we would love to come play. We actually kind of were joking about how we would describe our sound, and we actually did settle upon if Earth, Wind and Fire and Jamiroquai were kind of melded together in this modern neo soul kind of outfit, because a lot of the stuff that we write has some of those sort of break time sort of feel things in it, but then there's also it's interesting because a lot of us draw lots of different influences from all over the place, so it's an amalgam, I think is a good word.
Yeah, it gets there's just everybody has their own background, and yes, there's a lot of overlap, but there's also just some things that only one member of the band is super into.
What are you super into? That's completely weird.
That's completely weird.
Or that only you are into.
I have my answer ready if Reed needs a second. I really I'm a big metalhead, so I listen to a lot of really the appeal to metal to me is in really low frequencies and tunings and really rhythmically interesting things. So as of right now, I'm listening to a lot of progressive stuff that would be considered I don't even know, progressive death metal type of stuff. This band, the Swedish band Meshuggah is my favorite band right now. I also really am hip to this band in the States that's a progressive trio called Animals as Leaders. They've got a new record coming out soon. But yeah, so I'm super into metal, and no one else in the band. It's not that they're not into metal, but that's my primary when I'm driving to work in the morning, that's what I'm listening to.
Where do you work at?
I work in an eye doctor's office in Candler, and it's actually a really sweet day job. So
you're getting pumped up with Meshuggah.
Yeah.
Right before you.
I'm oh yeah, gonna look at people's eyes today and gonna start fights in the parking lot beforehand. Not really.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Did you think of one, Reed?
No. But I think I like a lot of corny things. I really like Billy Joel and super schmaltzy kind of stuff that I think other people kind of roll their eyes at a
You
little
listen
bit.
to a lot of Steely Dan.
I do listen to a lot of Steely Dan.
Yes. More than your average consumer of Steely Dan.
Well, y'all's music kind of lends itself to that too, because there's all these interesting changes. You mentioned earlier these different rhythmic drops, and that's what I noticed. It seems like you also have like a lot of hip hop as an influence as a drummer. Is that
that's a lot of the stuff that's more like neo soul, like hip hop influence is brought to the table by Nate, because he listens to a lot of 90s hip hop and a lot of 90s R&B. So like Jill Scott is like a really big influence for him in the way that he writes. His favorite artist is like D'Angelo. Yeah. And so you can hear a lot of that stuff, and like especially in some of the things that Nate brings to the table. The vast majority of this most recent record was like written in its totality by like the foundational stuff was written all by Nate.
Nate brought all or most of all the ideas to the table.
And then the actual process of getting the songs to sound like what they sound like on the record was a much more like kind of collaborative process.
What brought you guys to Asheville? Like, this is a super eclectic community.
I had a job lined up when I graduated.
I just came here to go to school, and then I was living in a house, and I'm still living in that house. So here we are.
So how long have y'all been together?
Shabudikah on the whole as an entity has been together since 2017, right?
Yeah, something like that, about the time I graduated.
The current lineup has been since we brought Hinton on board in October of 2019.
Yeah.
Right before everything.
Great time to have a new band member.
Exactly. And I came on board like 2 months before that, August of 2019.
Yeah.
Tell me the background on Sir Charles.
I can answer this one. So I mentioned way earlier that I was in a band with Nate originally and this other guy, Jamie Berlin. It's called Calvin Get Down. So he actually wrote that song while we were in that band. So it was actually technically the first original that I had ever played of Nate's. And I mean, so that being said, I've played this song for a number of years before, Phil was in the band and, so it's a good one. And I'm really happy it's one of the ones that's stuck around since those days, since Nate and I really first started playing together.
Coming up, Shabudikah shares their worst ever tour experience. And it's actually not the first time I've heard this exact story about this exact hotel. That's Appalachian Vibes coming up from WNCW. This is Appalachian Vibes from WNCW. I'm your host, Amanda Bocchi. If you're just tuning in, my guests are the Asheville Funk Soul Ensemble Shabudikah. I'm speaking with guitarist Reed and the drummer Phil. I've asked them to share their worst ever tour horror story, and I'm not half surprised.
So we played a gig a couple of months ago. It was we did like a little weekender to Roanoke, Virginia, and played a part of, I think they called it like Funk Fest or something like that. I don't remember.
I think it was like October Funk, but it was
Where was this at?
It was in
Roanoke,
Virginia at Martin's Downtown, which
yeah.
they were great. We loved Martin's Downtown.
Yeah.
Please have us back.
Yeah.
That was not the part. That was terrible.
Tell me.
So we left Asheville at probably I guess maybe noon that day, because it's only like a 3.5 hour drive there or something like that.
Something like that.
And so because we wanted to get there a little early, load in super early, have time to kind of check it out, look around, do whatever. So we get there, we get loaded in, everything's set up, and we're good to go. And the way that the show was set up is they had an outside stage and an inside stage, and we were gonna play 2 sets on the inside stage in between the other bands that were going on at the outside stage. So the first band played, they finished, then we played a set, then the second band played outside, and then we closed out the night. So we get there, we get loaded in, everything's good. First set went really, really well. And we had decided leading into this event that leading into this gig that it didn't really make that much sense for us to drive back that night, because we were gonna the set ended at 1:30 in the morning, and we had to play a gig in Black Mountain the next day, for a festival at 1 p.m. was our set time the next day. So we finished at 1:30 and then had another set the next day at 12:30 or 1 or something like that. So we were we're just gonna stay overnight. I'll find us a motel or something. And it'll be fine. It'll be all well and good. Never, ever, ever again will I invest money in staying at in a hotel.
Did you go to the Ramada?
Yes. She knows.
Y'all went to the Ramada.
The Ramada in Roanoke. Yes.
This is not the first time I've heard this story. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, dude. It was. We get back to the hotel. So already checking in was kind of a bit of a nightmare, because
first of all, okay, can I just some background on the Ramada? So I'm from Roanoke.
Oh my God. Okay.
That place is literally being torn down because the homeless issue and drug overdose issue there is so bad that it's a blight on the city.
Oh, really?
Just so you know, but it is the cheapest in town.
Oh yeah, it was very cheap for two rooms for a night was not barely $100.
It makes you wonder why is it this cheap?
But yeah, so the check-in process was already really bad. We rolled up to the hotel at 4:00 and it said check-in was at 2:30 or 2 or something like that, and I was hey, I'm checking in, gave him my last name. And they were oh, your room's not ready yet, you need to come back later. And I was bro, what? Check-in is literally at 2:00. It's 4:30 now. What do you mean my room's not ready? And so that was the first thing. Luckily, dude, there was some sort of
there was a wedding
it was
going
either
on
a wedding,
at that Ramada.
It was a wedding or a quinceañera or something like that. I don't know what was going on.
A lot of family in clothes that you could tell a lot of them felt uncomfortable.
Very, very colorful garb that, I said, I couldn't tell if it was a wedding or a quinceañera. It was just it was insane. So yeah, we get back to the hotel at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm all right, I'm gonna rinse really quickly. Hot water didn't work, so there was one. So that was fun. Rinsed off really quickly because I get really gross and sweaty when I play. As do most people when they gig. And so get back, I rinse off really quickly, and I was all right, I'm gonna set an alarm because we had to get back on the road at 6:30 or 7 like the next day, maybe, like in order to get to the festival that we were playing the next day on time. Like we had to leave like that early. And so I 2:30 set an alarm for like 6 or something like that. And I wake up and I don't have any problem usually getting out of bed when it comes to like that kind of stuff. So I like kind of roused Reed and Hinton were in my room, and Nate, Justice, and Pat were in the other room. And so I got up, roused Reed and Hinton, and went and knocked on the door to make sure that like Nate and everybody else was getting up. Went down to the Continental Breakfast to see if there was like anything. And we're talking like, there's like little cartons of milk that you can get at like your school lunches. There were like 6 of those sitting out, and one of those like cereal dispensers that you turn the knob on and it like puts out like some Raisin Bran and like Fruit Loops. And I was like, man, they like, didn't have any powdered donuts or anything like that.
Just stark fluorescent lighting that was flickering, kind of.
Oh, dude, it was so bad.
You got off easy. You
got and then this isn't even the worst part. Like as we were getting ready to go, Nate was just like, Phil, this was 100% on me, and I will readily admit that I was like the one that found this place and booked it. And Nate was like, dude, Phil, I'm gonna kill you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he walks over as I get back to the room to make sure they're all awake. He walks over and he takes his comforter and holds it up to the lamp. And there's just like, it's a white comforter, but like if it's laying on the bed, it looks clean, but he holds it up to the lamp and it's just got like splotches of just like brown. I don't know what it was. I don't care to know. As far as we know, Nate has not had any sort of lasting health implications arise from this particular run-in, but
well, he said he didn't. He slept with no blanket that night.
You guys,
think about it, I get shudders.
You guys,
oh my God.
You guys.
Oh, and we like loaded, like we're talking like we loaded all of our gear into our hotel room like that night because we were like, no way are we leaving our stuff in the car. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the neighborhood like place that
it's not even the neighborhood. It's literally just that parking lot. It's like that hotel and parking lot, and then they have this weird conference center.
Yeah, that was where that wedding or quinceañera or whatever was going on, and it was still going on at like 2:30 in the morning. Like when we rolled back in from the gig, it was wild. that will always be one of my favorite like overnight gig stories. That one was great. Got up and drove to Black Mountain to play the festival the next day to a crowd of like 15 people or something like that.
Tell me about the song Soundcheck.
That was a song that Nate literally wrote every part to that song during sound checks. So that's, I mean, and it is, tongue in cheek. But then, I think it really, once we finally put it all together, because, he would just sort of, just warming up on the keys, just kind of like have like one part and then sort of the next part. And, we would all, we'd be sound checking as well, and we'd kind of sort of mess around with it as well. But then he took it away and just like, all right, well, I'm going to write the song called Soundcheck. And that's how it happened.
Feels like we're falling off the edge of this earth when we wander on till the lines are all blurred. I ain't worried, love. I know you and I will find ground to lay upon as we fade out of sight. There's something about it. There's no way around it. There's something about you. Now that I found you. Sound check 1, 2. Am I getting through to you? Can we make this new? Downbeat flows, play it through. And it's all but mine. I see it all the time. Running in these circles where there's no end to fall out of line. Feels like we're I check you out, can you hear the sound surround? Like the waterfalls, power draws, hearts fall down, and it's no fault but mine. I wrote you into lines, and at the sound check realized it's only you on my mind.
That's Shabudikah on Appalachian Vibes. Hear more from Shabudikah on Spotify. My next guest is a mix of alt country, rock, and Americana. Dave Hedeman and the Gone Ghost from Carrborro, North Carolina, is the brainchild of singer-songwriter Dave Hedeman.
My name's Dave, or Dave Hedeman, and we're called Dave Hedeman and the Gone Ghosts.
My name's Justin Bolin, and I mostly handle lead guitar duties and backup vocals in the band.
Yeah, we play, I think we sort of call it like alt country rock, a little bit Americana. It's hard to define, but that's of the genres provided, that's the one we kind of go with.
Yeah, it's hard to, anytime people ask me, what our sound is, it's kind of hard to describe. But yeah, it's alt country, but it's fairly rock oriented as far as that genre is concerned.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions to ask artists, because everyone is just like, oh my God, what kind of music is it?
Yeah. And the what you want to do in that situation is compare yourself to other bands and other artists that people have heard of, and try to draw that comparison to help them familiarize themselves with your sound. But then you don't, I don't always want to put that idea in people's heads. I want us to be our own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Who do we sound like, Dave?
I don't know. I think it sort of, it runs through a couple areas, because you're right. Sometimes it goes more rock oriented, and sometimes it feels a little more country oriented. It just depends on the song that we're doing. I think that's what it's more of like a songwriter's sort of thing, where we just try to serve the song as best we can and let the genre kind of sort itself out for people who need to that sort of categorization.
Sure, because we never really had that conversation as a band of like, well, because some bands do that where they're like, well, who do we want to sound like? We never did that. We just, write the songs and we sound like what we sound like.
So I'm guessing, Dave, that this whole project started with you. How long have you been playing?
I've been playing since I was, I want to say I started my first band in like the spring of 1994. So in many iterations, so close to 30 years. I think we're talking about doing a reunion with my, first band, Puddle Duck, which was sort of this band from I know it's a terrible name, but we just sort of, we had a really good sort of run in the late 90s, and we were in the sort of roots rock jam band kind of scene. Every now and then we get the itch to kind of get back together. So that I think in typical fashion will be our 28th year reunion for that band. And so, yeah, I've been playing, probably for 28, 30 years in different iterations, and took a good time break in between. And I think how this band started is when I moved to North Carolina, I started playing with some guys that I had known in a band called the Vagabond Union. We did that for about 8 years or so, but it was difficult because we had guys living in Virginia and North Carolina and Charleston. So like we were really gung-ho in the beginning, and then it just got harder, a little bit harder to get together. And we still play, but we weren't playing as frequently. So the bass player and I are both in that band. And when we got back home, we were like, man, maybe we can play more frequently if we start something, you know, locally in North Carolina. And so that's where we brought Justin and our drummer Scott in, because we had been doing sort of like a pickup band thing every now and then together anyway. And we were like, well, let's take some of the songs that the Vagabond Union didn't want to do and create a new band. So this is how that band kind of came out of that band.
That's We Can't Run from Dave Hedeman and the Gone Ghosts. Stay tuned for more from the Gone Ghosts next on Appalachian Vibes from WNCW. My guest is the alt-country Americana outfit, Dave Hedeman and the Gone Ghosts.
So do you guys have did you immediately have this connection?
You know, for me, and having played in a lot of bands and dealing with a lot of different personalities, like this is just a really good group of solid human beings. Like everyone's really kind and nice and like very open, and like there's no weird, weirdo band person in there that you're sort of circling around. So it's just been super fun. I think that's sort of our mantra is like, it needs to be fun first, and then who cares about what comes after that? Like, I don't care if anyone likes it. I don't care. I think this is really just for us. And I think that's the lesson I've learned over 30 years is like, stop trying to play for the audience, just do what you love. And hopefully that'll translate to them as seeing that you love it, versus trying to like hit a genre or try to find, hit the right moment in music. So I stopped caring about that and just like, want to do things that I like to do. And if you're into it, awesome. And if you're not, that's cool too. Like, whatever.
That's so refreshing to hear. I have to say, like, I interview a lot of artists, and what I hear so much is a lot of pandering, just so much trying to, not even wanting to tell the story about a song that they wrote because they want it to be universal. And I'm like, but it's not. Like, it happened to you, right?
Right.
So what's
totally.
the story, right? So when you try to like homogenize everything and make it so like, oh, this can fit every situation, or this could be used for a commercial or for a, or for the end of the world, or for whatever you want to use it for. Like, not everything is like that. So have you found that this, like, that's changed for you? Like, you've had to come to this? Because a lot of young artists really, really, really do not feel that way.
Yeah, I think for me, having gone through it in the 90s, and we sort of came in that early Dave Matthews Blues Traveler era of music, and we kind of fit in that genre. And then I remember the moment I was working at my job, that I had at the time, and Radiohead had just put out OK Computer, and like all of us were like, oh no, like music's just like, someone made that's amazing, and then you start to question everything, and just the genres start to change and what's becoming popular, and it was really messing with me, and I stopped. You also, when you're playing a lot, you kind of stop being a fan, and you're just so in your world, you can't get out of your own head. And so, yeah, I took some time off to become a fan again, and just kind of decide how I wanted to approach music, or even if I wanted to do it at all anymore, because you can get the wind knocked out of your sails when you're really, really trying to go for it. But yeah, no, when I got back into it, I made an effort to just say, you just stop worrying about what people like, because, genres come and go. And, I think I just wanted to write stuff that felt maybe timeless, or like didn't really matter. And I think that's where the alt country kind of sound works really well, because it just can continue on, without having to be the popular thing at the moment. But I remember this one moment from a show, which was amazing. We were playing at this bar in town, and it was owned by a guy who was like really into the Grateful Dead and like jam band music. And we're not really that. I think we kind of maybe can float in and out of that, but that's not really our thing. And I just remember watching him, and he was perplexed. Like, he didn't know what was going on, and was just like, wasn't sure what he was making of it. And I, like, normally that would have crushed me, years ago, but then I noticed this one guy in the background. He's just like, yeah, like he's totally into it, and I'm like, well, that guy gets it, and this guy might not, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you're just connecting with, if someone connects with it, like that's amazing that anyone even spends the time wanting to listen to anything that we're making. Like, I'm so grateful that anyone wants to hear it. So it's sort of like, I think when you recalibrate your expectations, it just makes the whole experience like 100 times better.
And I don't want to go on about the shape I'm in. Seems this road is taking more than I was prepared to give. I love you more than words can say, and I got nothing left to give. when these demons take their hold on me, it's harder to forgive. And I don't want to die here. I don't want to die here. And I don't want to die here with you tonight. Need to find a better way for us to better pass the time. Need to find some better ways to get you off my mind. We've come too close to heaven more times than we should. And it seems like we ain't thinking about what's best for our own good. And I don't want to die here. I don't want to die here. And I don't want to die here with you tonight. And I don't want to die here. I don't want to die here. And I don't want to die here with you tonight. Lately I've been thinking about the way things used to be. Lately I've been thinking about that man I used to see. Come too far for far too long, but I'm far from relief. And I can't go on like this no more till I find myself relief. And I don't want to die here. I don't want to die here. And I don't want to die here with you tonight. And I don't want to die here. Yeah, I don't want to die here. And I don't want to die here with you tonight. And I don't want to hear no more words you need to say. Down this road so many times and it always goes straight. And I can't go on like this no more, not one more day. Might be time we go our separate
How long did you take off to become a fan of music?
I want to say we did our last show in like the beginning of 2000, and then I, moved up to DC and then moved to Florida for a job for a year. And Florida was like devoid of a real music scene. It was a lot of cover bands, great punk rock scene. I will say that. Like I definitely was opened up to a lot of punk rock bands that I'd never even, gone down. So that actually was where the journey began, is sort of like listening to different styles of music and being like, seeing the overlap, being like, oh, a good song is a good song. It doesn't matter what the genre is. So that was about a 6-year window. And then when I moved back to North Carolina, I had this really random meeting. I met Jason Isbell at a bar in Charleston, and this was like in the beginning of his solo career. There was maybe like 30 people at the venue, but I had been becoming a fan of the Truckers and stuff like that. It was right when he split from them, and we were just sort of talking, off to the side, and I was like, oh man, I used to be a musician, like I love this. And he was like, you still are, man, you just got to like get back out there and do it. And like, it seems like a very trivial conversation, but like I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's right. Like if you're really passionate about it, maybe you should. So immediately upon, re-entry to North Carolina, I contacted members of my old band, and we decided to do a reunion show in Richmond, where we were from. And it was like a crowd of 400 people came out. We sold the bar out of liquor, like the bar ran out of booze. And we were like, at one point, someone was like, man, Larry was drinking a Zima. Like, we know that that's bad when like people are resorting to. So it was just a great night. And I think that was like the spark to be like, oh, you took all this time off and you should do this again because you love it, but maybe just try to reimagine a place where you can do both, where you can have a career, but also play music at a high level, and like see if you can make that work in some fashion. So yeah, that's where it all sort of exploded back for me.
Do you think that meeting with Jason Isbell was divine intervention?
I mean, it was, I don't know what to call it, but it was definitely timely. I think I had sort of like, I spent a lot of time playing music, you know, in my living room. I had just had my daughter too, so I was just in that phase of life, you know. But yeah, I mean, there was something special for me. I'm sure for him, I'm just another, another fan, and that he, had a million conversations with. But as being, just I respect his approach so much. Just having that moment, it was just a very simple response, and you're like, oh yeah. So yeah, I guess on some level it was some kind of, timely divine intervention. At least it helped spark me to sort of get back into something it's like my favorite thing to do. I like to mask themes, like I think a lot of the themes are for me are centered around loss and things like that. I lost my father at a young age and like some friends at young ages. And so I weave that into songs, but I like to mask it in like breakup songs. So it's like about saying goodbye, but it's about like getting the news. Like that's what the cannonball is like. When you get bad news, it kind of hits you, in that sense. And so I think that's where that comes out of, that kind of feeling of like just getting clobbered with like life, and then trying to like pick yourself back up after that. So that's kind of what that song is all about.
How old were you when you lost your dad?
18, yeah.
Were you expecting his death, or was it?
Yeah. He actually was he actually caught AIDS in the AIDS epidemic from a blood transfusion. And so it was like early on in that whole thing. So it was a really weird time to kind of go through because like you weren't allowed to tell anybody or talk about it. So like, but it really helped shape me, because I think I probably would have gone on a whole other path had that experience not happened. You know, and it just opened me up to being like, oh, you know, life's very short, and make sure you go out and just try to do something that you enjoy, you know. And so I think I've just kind of lived that mantra since then. But it's a theme throughout a lot of my music. Because it's really easy to tap into that feeling, and you know, I think a lot of people can kind of relate to that. So there's that theme kind of comes through a lot in different songs that I write.
That's Dave Hedeman and the Gone Ghosts on Appalachian Vibes. Thank you to my guests Shabudikah and the Gone Ghosts. If you'd like to learn more about any of the artists, you can head over to AppalachianVibes.net. You can also catch up on past episodes and nominate an artist there. Special thanks to Palmyra the band for the intro and outro music. Everyone have a beautiful week, and I'll see y'all next time for another episode of Appalachian Vibes from WNCW.